When I was at the University of Minnesota, I was part of a team teaching intimate relationships, and we talked about this idea of 1+1 = 2, and that you can't just be one person together. You have to be your individual person, and that together you make this relationship, but you come as whole and complete individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of what Sam is saying there, is that you have to be a whole and complete individual to have a real relationship.
The world may be ending, but can we make it a better place with movies? I'm Stephen Notham, and you're listening to Film Club for the End of the World. Today, the world ends with Perks of Being a Wallflower. In Perks of Being a Wallflower, Charlie, a fragile freshman, still grieving his best friend's suicide and death of his Aunt Helen, is taken in by two older misfits, the magnetic Sam and her stepbrother Patrick, and gets his first real taste of friendship, love, and belonging. But as the year goes on, blackouts and disassociative episodes begin to overtake him until a breakdown in the final act surfaces a buried memory of childhood abuse that reframes everything. Based on Stephen Chbosky's novel of the same title, it is of note that Chbosky also wrote the screenplay and directed the film, which might explain why it's such a perfect adaptation. Remember, this episode is only the start of the discussion. Become a member of Film Club for the End of the World on Patreon to get access to bonus episodes, video archives, a vibrant community of film overthinkers like yourself, and most importantly, your subscriber support helps to keep this show running. So I hope you'll consider joining the Film Club by heading over to Film Club for the End of the World on Patreon. My guest today is Dr. Jen Doty. Dr. Doty is an associate professor and family human services program director in the Department of Counseling, Psychology, and Human Services at the University of Oregon, where she is also affiliated with the Prevention Science Institute. Her work sits at the intersection of parenting, technology, and adolescent health, with a focus on cyberbullying, problematic digital media use, and related behavioral health challenges. She received her PhD in family social sciences from the University of Minnesota, was selected as a Society for Prevention Research Early Career Fellow in 2020, and a NIMH CHIPS Fellow in 2022. And her research has been funded by NIMH, NIDA, and the National Institute on Minority Health and Health Disparities. Welcome to the show. I will call you, I can call you Jen. I can call you Dr. Doty.
Yeah, Jen, please. And I'm so happy to be here. This is a fun conversation we're going to have.
Yeah, I've known Jen through our church community. We've known each other, and Jen is a fabulous person who manages to be extremely bright without ever showcasing and showing off how intelligent she truly is. You never feel like you're dumb when you're chatting with Jen, even though she's incredibly smart. You just feel enlightened, and she has such a way of speaking about important issues while also centering those conversations on love and understanding, which to me, I have a tendency to get bothered by things to the point where I feel like sometimes the emotion that's evoked isn't super, whether it's something going on in the world, maybe isn't the most productive, but Jen really inspires me as somebody. So really happy to have you.
Stephen, I always say, like, one of the challenges of being like a parenting expert, which is a lot of the research I do, and an adolescent expert, is having teens and adolescents myself. I was really humbled and I had to see the world in a more nuanced, gentled way. So yeah, I think family life itself has made me kind of bite my tongue and not tell others, how it's all supposed to work out, because I'm still trying to figure that out.
Yeah. Well, before we get into some of the stuff around, our podcast specific conversation, what are you right now? What's kind of the crux of maybe something you're working on, or something that you're trying to get published, some research you're doing?
Yeah, I'm really excited right now for our work around the Tech Checkup, which is an intervention that we've developed to reach middle school kids and their parents when they've been having some kind of problem already with digital media. And that could be that they are staying up late and scrolling and then falling asleep the next day in math. It could be that they have some problematic internet use, a little bit of
How
pre-addictive
does the
behaviors.
reporting work for this? Like these data points that they have, these challenges,
Yeah.
where is that data coming from?
Yeah, so the way that we're doing this is it's a motivational interviewing, and we do get referrals from like a social worker or someone in the school. We liaise with them, and we have kind of a checklist. If you see any of these behaviors, please refer the students to us.
Mm.
And then the students themselves do a lot of the self work. So we do have an initial baseline survey that we give them, and then we feed it back to them in a one-page document that's kind of like a red light, green light. These are the areas that you're green and doing really well. You connect with your friends. You have family support. But here you've got some yellow. It looks like sleep is an issue for you. And then we ask them, what do you think of this? Are the answers that you gave us, do they reflect what you really feel? And what are your strengths? What do you love about digital technology, and how's it working well in your life? And what are the areas that maybe you need a little support or you feel like you'd like to work on? And they work with our college students. And we just got back our data for the very first pilot we did of
Mm-hmm.
this. And it looks like those who participated at the end had lower cyberbullying and higher digital citizenship. So we have a 3-year grant now from the National Institute of Mental Health to develop this into an app and then still deliver it with this motivational interviewing technique with 120 kids. And so we're expanding and we're building on what we've done. And I'm really excited about it because we also communicate with the parents, and we're hoping to support the parents in that space as well.
Yeah, as you work on this, does the goal, I mean, I'm sure the goal differs from child to child, but generally speaking, is the goal just less digital media use? Is it that you want them to be more intentional about it and how they're going about it?
Yeah.
Or are you trying to get times down? What's sort of kind of
Yeah.
the goal?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we leave the goals that they are working on in their own hands.
Mm.
In terms of the research, there's a lot of mixed results when it comes to outcomes relating to just screen time in general. And I think that's because a lot of kids are doing just fine on social media, but it's a subgroup, a smaller group, maybe 20% that are being cyberbullied or cyberbullying others that have problematic internet use, which is excessive or risky online behaviors, and a small subgroup that are staying up half the night and falling asleep the next day, which can look like depression. So,
Mm-hmm.
so the goal is really for those who are already on that path to help to do harm reduction. And we let them define what harm reduction looks like, depending on what areas they feel they want to work on. And I don't know. I always say nobody likes to be told what to do, and I include myself in that.
In the
And
same
so,
way.
yeah.
When people give me a book as a gift, I feel like you've just given me homework. Even though I love books and I love reading,
Yeah.
I love books. I love going to a bookstore and picking out a book. But something about when they gift me, it's like, well, now you're going to ask me, did I read this?
Yeah,
So
now it's an obligation.
Yes,
Yeah,
I feel that.
And teens are in that time of life when they're individuating, they're becoming their own person, they're very independent. And so we try to work with that those developmental trends and do this motivational interviewing, which is really putting them in the driver's seat of their own digital media use.
I think that's so important. I think I was at the very kind of beginning of the internet age, and there was a lot of, I think parents just didn't really know how to deal with the concept of the internet and their children.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of we didn't really get to learn to regulate ourselves in terms of the internet. It was like, I'm taking the router with me when I'm gone, or
Right.
or something, which once again, I think my
Yeah.
parents and other parents, like they were in the Wild West of like this internet thing is new.
Yes. That's
But
probably where we were with our kids for sure.
yeah, but I love this idea of no, this is like a tool. It's not going anywhere. We need to learn
Yeah.
how to use it and use it in a healthy way.
Yeah. And there are some kids who come to us and say, yeah, I'm using this way too much. Like, the average amount that teens 13 and above are using digital media, according to a Common Sense Media survey, is 8.33 hours. That's a lot of hours.
Mm,
And it doesn't include homework or being in
right.
school. So some of them do come to us and say, yeah, I want to use digital media less. And they come back, and in our interviews, they've said things to us like, yeah, and now I'm only using digital media 4 hours a day. And I'm putting away my phone an hour before bedtime, or I'm
Mm.
not taking my phone to school anymore. And they're proud of themselves. And
Oh
we've had a
yeah.
few of some of the teens have told us, we don't want big tech manipulating us. We don't
Oh, that's
want,
like the next level
yeah,
thinking on like the reasoning of why they don't
yeah.
want to.
Yeah, well, and that's after they've had the conversations. We've talked to them about algorithms and how they work, and we've done some instruction, and our college students have worked with them, and so that's where they've landed. And we didn't tell them that, but they're like, "Yeah, I don't want to be manipulated."
Hmm.
So,
Yeah, well, there's a lot of adults that need to learn that lesson too. The
yeah,
funny thing is that we focus all these conversations on adolescents and cell phones and adolescents and social media, but I find that there are a lot more adults who are completely oblivious to how unregulated they are and how much they're on their
yes,
phones and in digital spaces and how much it's warping their perception of reality and themselves. But because they're adults, they feel like I don't know. But when a kid does it, they're on their phone that for that long. It's like, oh, that kid's on
yeah,
their phone forever. But you find these adults that are in these digital spaces for often more time. And
yeah.
yeah, I find that interesting.
Well, there's a good argument to be made that, we keep talking about a teen mental health crisis. And that's true. There is a kind of a mental health crisis going on with teens. However, what we don't talk about is there's a mental health crisis going on with adults. And it's actually
Oh
probably a
yeah.
lot worse than it is for kids. But the rates of suicides for middle-aged men are going up. The opioid and drug abuse issues that we have across the country for the last 20, 30 years has been pretty outstanding. Now, fentanyl, and kids lost parents and adults in COVID. And so sometimes I think it's easier to see it in a generation behind us than looking
Hmm.
at ourselves as adults and saying, gosh, we've got some things ourselves that we need to work on.
Oh yeah. Well, and a lot of times the adults are modeling the
Absolutely.
digital the poor digital media use. Not that it's bad, but
Yeah.
like their behaviors and their routines with it. You'll see it a lot. Just parents who are constantly on their phones, and I've been in that moment. Sometimes I look at myself. I'm like, what am I doing? Like, why did I get this thing
Yeah.
out? Like, it's just like
Yeah.
force of habit. Okay, well, yeah, I'm excited
Yeah.
to hear how the work progresses. Let's talk about uh, your After the Bomb movie. So in After the Bomb movie, we imagine some cataclysmic event has happened. Most of humanity has been wiped out. Society has collapsed, and there are a few humans left who are now going to rebuild the world. And you only get to pick one movie that they get to have to watch as they do that. You just
Yeah.
get one. What movie do you pick and
Okay.
why?
It's really embarrassing. I thought about this for some days ahead, and I was like, okay, I would like to pick something cool that makes me sound like a really thoughtful person, but ultimately I landed on National Treasure.
Oh.
And I have to tell
I'm interested to hear the reasoning.
the reason. Okay, so and this is just me personally, as literally our world has become more scary, and there's been some really significant challenges globally. I find that I need dumb formulaic entertainment because stuff that is and Nicolas Cage delivers that so well, right? Like
Hmm.
with his own like very,
There's a map on the
melodramatic way,
Declaration
right?
of Independence.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. But our family has seen that movie probably close to 100 times, and it's when you're living in a world where there's like real challenges, something about entertainment that can tie it all up in a bow in 2 hours or less is just all about I can handle. I have a hard time like with anything that's nihilistic. Like it
Mm.
might be like pure art, and I used to enjoy it more. I was an English major like a million years ago, and I loved like the deep thinking but right now my work is pretty intense, and I have a friend who says if you're not working on something that can't be solved in your lifetime, it's not worth it.
Mm. Oh, that's interesting.
And so many of the issues that we're working on, like this digital media and how to handle it in kids' lives and in families' lives, it's a big, hairy wrestle. And
Yeah.
I find when I want entertainment, I just need something simple and often not, I still go see Oppenheimer and like the recent
Uh-huh.
Odyssey and all of these, and I enjoy them, but I don't want to be watching them all the time. And if I was living through an apocalypse, I
Yeah.
certainly wouldn't be wanting to take the time then.
No, yeah. Anna is the same way, my wife Anna, and it'll be like a Friday night, and I'm like, do you want to watch, something like Perks of Being a Wallflower? She's like, no, I want to watch, Bridesmaids or something funny. Like, I want to watch
Yeah.
something, she's like, no, I had a hard week at work. I don't want to watch a sad movie right now. So, you're in the same boat as Anna. What I think is interesting about your choice is that I would hope that as this film becomes sort of such an artifact of culture, that these people rebuilding society would be inspired, and that all of their founding documents and all of their stuff would actually be puzzles and clues, and that they would have all this hidden stuff, so that there would be. I would hope they're like, that's actually a good idea. They actually kind of cooked here. Maybe we should have all of our documents also be maps, and in all of our structures, we should connect a big puzzle and make like our whole new country one big escape room. I think
And
that's
a
a
secret
fabulous
society to guard it all.
yes. Like, okay, as long as it's not, the lizard people, But let's dig in to Perks of Being a Wallflower. You had mentioned that this was the first time that you had seen this film. And as somebody who is very much in the spaces of adolescent development and teens, what was kind of your initial response to the film?
Yeah, no, it was a beautiful, beautiful film. And as I thought about it, there were a few things that stood out to me. One, teens are just great. Like they have such good energy,
Mm-hmm.
and they, that moment of being a teen and the exhilaration of it comes
Oh,
through really
yeah.
clear in the movie. The second thing that stood out to me was the importance of support, both from peers and from trusted adults, and what goes wrong when you don't have that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the third thing was just the contrast to today's teens, because I thought it was interesting. It came out about 2008, I want to say, which was an inflection point in our society because we were switching to a more digital world. And it was,
I think it came out maybe that's when the book came out. The film came out, I think in
2012.
2012. Okay.
Yeah, 2012. Maybe the book was a little earlier.
Yeah.
But it was kind of an inflection point in how the way teens function. And it was reflecting back to an early time, which was when I grew up in the 1990s. And so that contrast between the 1990s and today's digital teens was something I was thinking about a lot. And there's some things that are still very much the same in terms of adolescent development that still work today. And then there's some things that are different because of the digital landscape.
Yeah, I did see the mixtapes as sort of a stand-in for social media in a way, like these are these things that we share with
Yeah.
each other, and we have our
Yeah.
own sort of culture through some form of, a form of digital media, not connected to the internet, and the fanzine that they work on, so they have these connections, but they're doing so much more in person, as opposed to just connecting in online spaces. I want to talk about the point you made about the supports. Um,
Yeah.
One thing that I find interesting about this film is that I think the first time I watched it, you're like, wow, Charlie's life just kind of like stinks. Like that's really awful and terrible. That's so hard. And his high school life looks so hard. But then when I was watching it this time, I thought, I'm so impressed by Charlie at the beginning of the
Yeah.
film because
Yeah.
despite all of the stuff he's been through, losing his friend in that way, the abuse he experienced with his aunt, how
Yeah.
really awful the first day of high school is, he's going to the dance by himself, he's going to the football game by himself, and he goes up and he talks to
Yeah.
Patrick like he works at the
He's
Courage, and he's like,
yeah.
and I'm like, oh my gosh, like so many kids don't even take that step. I'm like, Charlie saves a
Yeah.
lot of people. It's like, oh, these friends saved Charlie, and that's true, but Charlie deserves a lot of credit in putting himself out there and what he did to save himself.
Yeah,
Because
he's
he
really
does
a
a lot.
resilient hero in the end.
Hmm.
He's resilient and he overcomes a lot. And that's I think what makes it such a powerful film for me is the resilience that he shows. And I recognize that both he seeks out what he needs and other people are there to give him the support that he needs. And that's, the two older teens, Sam and Patrick, who like take him under their wings and they recognize it's so beautiful when he goes to that first party and they actually
Yes.
recognize what a tough spot he's in. And at the end, they all like toast to Charlie. And that moment for
Oh,
me was like, oh, like the power, and this is something that I wish all teens could see the power they have to make a difference in somebody else's life.
oh yeah.
And in this case, they recognize that. And and even though they're going through hard things,
Hmm.
they lift him up. And in doing that, they strengthen themselves.
Yeah. Well, and after Patrick gives that speech, Charlie says, I thought nobody noticed me, which is just, it's such a real, having been
Yeah.
a teacher for so many years, there are so many kids that just feel completely invisible. Um,
And in adolescent development, that is significant because their brains are noticing how much other people are noticing them. They walk through life as if they're on a stage.
oh yeah.
And to be an adolescent with no audience, is a lonely place to be because literally their brains are set up to kind of be socially wired and connect with other people. And if those connections are just absent, that is one thing that I think is different for teens than it is for adults, is just that social intensity.
Yeah, well, and I don't know if your research has touched on this, but we now have now teens have a metric for whether they're being uh noticed or not. Like in this
Yeah.
era, it was like, are people talking to me at school? But now there are teens who do try to create content, whether it's a video or post a picture, and how many likes does it get? How many, like, in a
Yeah.
way that's been amplified because now there's a specific metric that can be assigned, whether it be by likes or followers or
Yeah.
whatever. And I got to think that for those kids who want to be noticed, that can sort of amplify that anxiety to a degree.
Yeah, absolutely. And a lot of my work has been around cyberbullying, and we talk about there's a lot of overlap between bullying and cyberbullying, and a lot of times it's the same people. But what's different about the online space is that it can be anonymous, so you don't know who it's coming
Hmm.
from. And so there's a power differential. So somebody who doesn't have power in real life can gain that online through that anonymity. And then there's how fast and far it spreads.
Right.
And I don't know, have you heard of the book Accountable?
Mm-mm.
There was a New York, if you want the Cliff Notes version, there was a New York Times article about this situation. It was a group of teens outside of Berkeley in a small town. And you start to learn about the kid who started this. And he had a tough life. He had a tough background. And he created a Finsta. And he and his friends started he got into a kind of a cool crowd and started connecting with some guys and realized that edgy humor sold well with them. And so he created this Finsta and fake Instagram for those who may
Mm-hmm.
not have heard of a Finsta. And they would make fun of people at their school. And it turned dark, edgy humor turned racial really quick. And they started like taking pictures of their friends and making racial comments,
Mm.
sharing like really awful things, and all in a funny, we're not serious way, while still being friends with these people in real life. And they would get likes, and there were bystanders that would watch all of this. And then the girls found out, because it was mostly girls that were get the target of this.
Right.
And once it did, it blew up and it went all the way to the Supreme Court, lawsuits, and it blew up their lives. It blew up their friendships.
Oh.
And so the capacity for this online stuff to spread farther and faster than you ever thought it was is kind of, teens are developing their prefrontal cortex and they don't think about
Mm-hmm.
the consequences of their actions long term. And that's the challenge.
Yeah. No, yeah. Before you say something to somebody at school, it's like, yeah, you're going to get in trouble for that, but it's not broadcast all over the internet. And now somebody could have their phone out and be filming it. Or this anonymous example like you're giving, there's so many things for teens to navigate mentally
Yeah.
now that
Yeah.
they didn't have to before.
So I think about that scene in the movie Perks of Being a Wallflower. And back in the 90s, there's a fight, everybody gathers and you're watching the fight. But now those fights are filmed and
Right.
they're posted. And there's teens who are instigating the fights and coordinating with them in schools with their phones. And we interviewed folks about this and have a published paper about it. And then it goes viral, but they're instigating the fight in order to get likes. And so there's so many, you were a former teacher, so many teachers who are just relieved that the phones, at least in 31 states, are no longer available during school because of stuff like that. And I can imagine that fight, if Patrick's fight had been filmed, how much more devastating that would have been for him. Like, homophobia was stronger in a lot of ways in the 90s. It wasn't as accepted for teens in particular to be out and open. But if that went viral, that would be a whole different level for that
Oh, yeah.
that friend group,
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And just because you're out to a friend group to then automatically be outed to like the whole world is a very different thing. That scene is so heartbreaking. Patrick to me is such an interesting character. I love all the narration that Charlie gives, but when he talks about how every night when he goes out with him after him and Brad break up, that he always goes out with really, really high spirits. He's usually excited, but then as the night goes on, it winds down and he's just sad again. And I remember interacting with kids like that and as a teacher and when I was an adolescent, like to me, that longing, and that fight is just so devastating that they love each other and they're tearing each other apart.
It is. It's a heartbreaking scene. And there's also, coming back to that idea of support, the reason why they're able to make it through as a group of misfits through such devastating experiences is because they've got each other. And and we do know this goes for adults too. Social support, at least in one researcher's conceptualization, is more powerful for outcomes than a lot of other protective factors. And they say loneliness, the opposite, is just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, as like smoking a pack of cigarettes a day. And so the fact that they have each other is so protective.
Right. Well, and I think this film does a good job of showing that not necessarily are the kids who are getting the best grades necessarily the kids who are going to provide the best support for your adolescent.
Yeah.
And it's easy to say now when I don't have an adolescent, if my child goes to a party where they have LSD, like obviously you can watch this
Yeah.
movie and you can see a lot of different things. But I think that, like you said at that party, they are so supportive and they love Charlie so much, and everything falls apart when he loses that support after which the scene with Mary Elizabeth when they're playing Truth or Dare, and then he says, kiss the most beautiful girl in the room, and then he kisses Sam.
Oh,
Like
so
that scene is
brutal.
brutal. But when they're like, truth or dare, truth, he's like, how's your first relationship? He's like, it's horrible. I'm in hell. I dream of us both getting cancer, so it will end. I think that's an important formative experience for every adolescent or young person to be in a relationship that is not like that they're just not happy in.
And he doesn't know how to set boundaries.
Right.
And that may also be part of his trauma, right?
Exactly. Well, it's interesting you bring that up because he was sexually assaulted by his aunt. And then he actually gets sexually assaulted by other characters in the film. When Mary Elizabeth starts putting moves on him, there's no question of like consent. She just kind of starts making him do this stuff.
Yeah.
And you can tell he's like not really interested at all. There's no vigorous consent. He's not, but he goes along with it and I find that dynamic very similar to probably what he was feeling when he was abused by his aunt. And then once again, Patrick, when he's kind of at his low, he kisses Charlie. And once again, Charlie kind of sees it coming, but can't really verbalize. And so there's this kind of strand throughout of that and the abuse point. One of the reasons that he's so infatuated and loves Sam so much is because she's been through stuff like him. And she doesn't really even know that for the whole film. None of us do. And it's like these invisible ways that people give support to each other just by being vulnerable and sharing who you are. It's done so very, very beautifully in this film.
Yeah. And it's interesting because thinking about what's different from the 90s to now, I'll watch movies from before the Me Too movement or shows and be like, wow, what we accepted as normal is really a form of harassment. And it's just, we don't always see it when it is part of our culture. Right. And I hope that we're more self-aware, but in other ways, there was another book that I read a couple years back, Reclaiming Sex, and it was about the current, and they focus on heterosexual norms in dating, but how there's just expectations that people don't really want to have and deal with. And they are accepting like a hypersexualized relationship when that's not what they really want. And that's become a norm. We definitely haven't figured things out, even though it's the post Me Too movement era.
Yeah, it feels like we lost one thing, which was bad, but now we're sort of in and I wouldn't even say we've lost it. We've pushed back on it. It's still everywhere. But there is a general acceptance that like that's not okay. It's kind of coming back a little bit now. But we're also kind of left now in this kind of vacuum of, what is it going to look like?
Well, and who are we? I think men and women in our current society are at odds and asking who are we and who are we to each other in really, it's almost like a cultural standoff, you know? But I don't know that we want to go that direction. Let me come back to how this all comes to a head for Charlie is he does end up connecting with Sam, and all of this comes to a head, the trauma he experienced as a child. And I think one of the things that's really challenging is we are often really judgmental for someone who has experienced, even as an adult, abuse and trauma, and why didn't they stop it? Why didn't they say something? And in this case, it was a child who, somebody that he should have been able to trust. And he
Hmm.
describes how she was the only person he could talk to growing up, which makes that
Yeah.
even more devastating because it was a trusted relationship and she took advantage of that.
Right.
Um, but it comes out because he has a moment with somebody he trusts and loves and realize, wow, this is a problem. I need to address it.
I don't think Charlie ever opens up to the doctor at the end of the film in that moment after he has that episode where he finally says what happened. I don't think he does that without meeting all of the people that he did, because there's a question that he asks Sam that night. When he asks her a question, he says, "Do you ever worry that if people knew everything about you on the inside, that they would think you're crazy and wouldn't want to talk to you?" And she says,
Uh,
like, all the time. But she talks about how she's gotten through that. And so Charlie seeing that Sam has been through that, but that she didn't lose any of her friends. She didn't lose who she was by opening up about that, is so formative. And I think that's the main reason that Charlie finally opens up about it, which the first time I watched the movie was a little wild to me because I assumed that the parents knew, because everybody knows about these episodes, and you have his brother like
yeah.
on Christmas Eve, like, "Is it bad tonight, Charlie?" Like, everybody's aware of him, and yet there's still a layer that they don't know about,
Yeah.
which is impressive that
Yeah.
he's already been through all this. He's already opened up about some things, but still he hasn't been
Yeah.
able to break through that one wall, and it's only his friends that finally give him
Yeah.
the confidence and the fortitude to do that.
Yeah. A lot of the work that I do is working with parents and some and evidence-based programs to help parents strengthen their relationship with adolescents, to notice them, notice what they're doing well, notice what they're like, connect, find times, spend quality time with them, uh, learn how to ask them directly for what needs to be done, and then hold boundaries. So if parents aren't modeling how to hold healthy boundaries, and then kids don't learn that. And the outcomes for kids when parents can do that and have a strong relationship with kids are outstanding. We see 8 to 10 years later that kids are less likely to be involved in drug abuse, that they're less likely to drop out of school. They're more likely to get better grades. There's some recent research showing that there's less likely to have depression and suicide if we can strengthen the parent-child relationship. And I think what's happened in our society is that parents who are educated have taken that and gone hyper, like,
Mm,
helicopter parenting, but
right.
just having balanced warmth and engagement with kids is incredibly protective. And it seems pretty clear to me that Charlie doesn't have that. He has parents who care about them, but they're not engaged.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think you see that when he comes home from the first day of school, which was terrible. And the dad's like, "Hey, how was the first day?" It's like, "Yeah, it was fine." He's like, "Don't you feel silly now, champ, for saying you thought it'd be bad?" It
Yeah,
cracked me up how I love the film, but how stereotypical the the dad was as a character, and
yeah,
which I don't think is inaccurate. There are a lot of dads who are just like that sort of, they're providing and they're oblivious.
yeah,
But and the very first thing that Charlie says, which I think this is indicative to what you're talking about, but the very first thing that Charlie says when he realizes he's in that mental institution is, "I can't be here. My dad can't afford it." Which is, I think, really telling about
yeah,
the sorts of things he worries about, and his
yeah,
parents, and like, and their relationship. I don't think his dad would have ever said that, but that's just his observation of how his dad
hmm,
thinks and how his dad views the world and how his dad sees him. And I thought that was
yeah,
pretty sad.
yeah, yeah. He does have Mr. Anderson, though, the
Mr.
teacher at
Anderson's great.
school. And I kid you not, this is like a mountain of research that if kids have like good relationships with their parents, or if they don't have that one trusted adult in their life, that can help them through, it makes a huge difference. And I do think that that's a point of resilience and support for Charlie. And we talk a lot about resilience as if it has to all come from the person, but
Right.
supports around the person are equally important. And there's the famous line from this movie. Um, he gives them books, which we may have feelings about that, but Charlie seems to appreciate that. But let's see. Charlie says, "Why do nice people choose the wrong people to date?" And Bill says, "Are we talking about anyone specific?" And Charlie nods. "Well, we can accept the love we think we deserve." And that, you see him throughout the movie accepting the love he thinks he deserves and not the love he wants. And that
Yeah.
changes at the end of the movie,
Well,
But
Sam kind of rebukes him on that because she says, is that what you want, to be with me? He's like, I just want you to be happy. And Sam says, you can't keep putting other people ahead of yourself and calling it
yeah,
love. Keep putting everyone ahead of
yes.
yourself and call it love, which I thought was a beautiful and transformative line. So sorry, I cut you off, but I thought
Yeah.
that line fed into kind of what you were about to
Yeah.
say.
Yeah, when I was at the University of Minnesota, I was part of a team teaching intimate relationships, and we talked about this idea of 1 + 1 = 2, and that you can't just be one person together. You have to be your individual person, and that together you make this relationship, but you come as whole and complete individuals.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's part of what Sam is saying there, is that you have to be a whole and complete individual to have a real relationship.
Yeah, and you want friends and a community that allows you and encourages you and helps you to become that, which I love the gift that Patrick gives him of all of the pieces of his suit, because they're like, well, you're going to be a writer and all great writers have great suits. So this idea that they are helping and they are fostering this identity, and not only them, but then
Yeah.
Mr. Anderson says, I don't think I could be much of a writer. I think I'm better
Yeah.
at this, but I think you could write a book one day. And I think people underestimate the impact of an adult saying something like that, a trusted
Yeah.
adult. If it's a teacher that you
Yeah.
don't care about and they're like, you could
Yeah.
do that, you're like, whatever, I can't stand you.
Yeah.
But when an adult that you really trust in a moment says something like, you could do that, it's
Yeah.
transformative. And so,
Yeah. And
Mr. Anderson's
we
fabulous.
We see that in the prevention research. My colleague, Rhonda Neese at the University of Oregon, has taken PBIS, positive behavior support, and she has made it more inclusive. And she trains teachers to do simple things like saying hi to kids at the beginning of class, like having a wrap up at the end of class, and really works on building relationship, and that you see the differences in the outcomes statistically: less bullying, more acceptance, better grades. I feel for teachers, especially in the current environment, because there's such a lack for education right now, and there's layoffs, and there's not a support for mental health,
Mm-hmm.
and where we as a society have decided not to invest in the next generation, the rising generation. And there's a lot of them who are pretty ticked at our generations for that, and rightfully so, but they can't vote. So we keep investing in other areas and not in the up and coming generation. And yet we know that if we support teachers and we pay them well, and
Mm-hmm.
they can do those small and simple things to make a difference in kids' lives, it truly does work. And we can see intergenerational poverty go down. We can see intergenerational mental health improve. We could see, social support and connection and emotional regulation, which is one of the best predictors of kids' mental health down the road, all improve. And you can tell I'm an optimist at the end of the day. I know the research. I know this stuff works, and I'm always fighting for it. And I'll admit I work too much, but it's so important that we as a society invest in this up and coming generation, because we know what works to support them. We do. And we need to find the political will to to invest in them.
Yeah, it's sad, that so many things that shouldn't be politicized are. Like for me, these things you're describing should be things that, and I think that on the surface level, everybody agrees on them, but it's then what that looks like in the school or how it's funded that makes people angry or whatever. But it's like, why wouldn't we pay teachers more? Is a great example. When I watched this film, I was I sobbed last night, and I made a video about it that I'm
Yeah.
gonna post. I might post either today or tomorrow, but so this is kind of previewing. Well, by the time this comes out, the video will have already been out. So I could say,
Yeah.
like in the past tense, I did this video. But in the video, I
Yeah.
talk about how one of the main reasons I left teaching behind was because even though Anna and I both worked, we could not afford a home
Yeah.
in where we lived.
Yeah.
And when I watched this film and that scene with Mr. Anderson at the end, where he's like, I think you could write a book. I had moments like that. I have kids. I have students that still occasionally like reach out to me and are like, oh, I have students that I see around town. They're like, oh, thanks for this or whatever it is. And when I watched this movie, I was just started sobbing last night. I thought, I feel a little selfish. Like I
Yeah.
sold them out for a payday to go to this corporate job, which I don't work anymore, but that was kind of the initial when I left. And I think it's no teacher should have to choose between helping kids and having a home. Like that's
Yeah.
a conversation and a thought process that shouldn't have to exist. We should value this
Yeah.
enough that we
Yeah.
pay teachers so much more.
Yeah.
Um,
Can I just like call out that in doing this podcast and this back to school theme of how do we help adolescents, you are still investing in the next generation, and it's just from a different angle.
Well, thank you. I
So,
do. I do. When I was working my corporate job, starting to talk about movies online really did become an outlet for what I used to do with students, which was like talk about books.
yeah.
And so it looks a little different. But I'm trying to now with this film club, I am trying to expand it more so that it's more of a community. So it does feel more like
Yeah.
kind of what I used to do as a teacher. Because to me, when I was teaching, like, yeah, English is important, learning how to write is important, but I always saw my primary goal as building people who love to write and love to read and love to talk about these
Yeah.
things. Because if you love it, then even if you're a little behind right now on your writing or reading, and we're going to work on those things, but if you truly learn to love it, you're going to engage in these things yourself and you're going to build that skill set up. And if you don't have the love and the passion about it and the understanding of why it's
Yeah.
important, then it doesn't matter really how much I teach you because you're probably not going to continue to engage with these things once you're done with my class or out of school.
Yeah.
And so I tried really hard to build community in my classroom, to get to know all the kids every day, first day of school. And if you ever have a kid who I taught, they will tell you this is true. But the first thing I did every day of school, on the first day of school, was I would memorize every single kid in every single class period's name. I would do the whole
Yeah.
entire class, and
Yeah.
they'd say at the start, there's 36 kids. Like, well, you're not going to memorize all our names in 10 minutes. I said, no, I'll have them all. I would memorize
Yeah.
every single name, and that act alone, being able to, when some kid walked in the classroom, being like, you know, hey, Mary
Yeah.
Ann, like I like your shirt. I like that band. And being able to
Yeah.
call their name. It seems like such a small thing, but transformative into like how kids
Yeah.
perceive themselves in your space.
I still try to do that with my college classes.
Oh, good.
Um, and it takes me 10 weeks because I have
Well,
110 kids in
right,
my
you have some of
undergraduate
these.
class. But
Mhm.
I don't always succeed perfectly, but I really try because I want them to know somebody recognizes who they are, and universities can be such a nameless place, and putting a name to a face is, I think, an act of honor for our
Mhm.
young people. Like, I see you, but that aside, I want to come back to another idea, and this is that it's interesting to see that you sobbed watching this, and I didn't get permission for this, but my partner, my husband Matthew, like, also just this really hit him, and I think about the need for young men to have support for their emotional life.
Mhm.
And that is not something we have in our society right now. And if you think about like my field, counseling psychology and human services, it used to be fairly balanced with in the profession of men and women working in the field. And it's become almost all women. As
Hmm.
I don't know why that is, if it's the push for STEM, and men were drawn to STEM. And I would say men come back to uh, what they call heal in the book of Boys and Men, because, STEM jobs are drying up right now because of AI, but
Right.
human uh, human services and behavioral health jobs are projected to grow 10 to 17%. And in this book of Boys of Men, they talk about how even though there are so many areas where women are still falling behind, are not able to break glass ceilings, for example, domestic violence, and abuse problems, another area, but that men at the bottom of the totem pole are really struggling, not graduating, not getting degrees, not
Right.
integrated in family life, not, um, having struggles financially, and not as many blue collar jobs, for example. And one of the things that strikes me about this movie is this young man who found support to address his emotional life, and how powerful that was in your reaction and my husband's reaction. Like this, we are not seen. We are not, our emotional life is not allowed. And to see this young boy have his emotional life healed
Hmm.
is just a powerful representation, because we don't see a lot of it in our society. And I think it is part of this cultural war that we're currently having of, like, okay, who are men allowed to be now?
Right. Yeah. I feel like the progression of my life in particular had just a weird alignment of times when it comes to like my social relationships around the same time that we had our first child, like 8 months later or so, or like a little bit a year later, we moved and COVID happened. And so it was a massive, I went from having this, I was and still am very close friends with my college roommates. Like we still talk all the time. And I lived near all of them when we were in Utah. And then we moved and COVID happened. It was a real like closing of social things. Like naturally when you have kids, you're just a little less social, but then you add COVID to it. And I haven't really rectified or dealt with fully, I think, how much those two things happening at the same time, along with some other things like my dad passed away, a lot of things kind of happened all at once. Like how much
Yeah.
that really altered my how I socialize and how I interact with people. Um, and so, yeah, I think that COVID in particular too also impacted. I mean, it not only did it divide our country a lot more, but it really changed a lot of ways that we view socialization.
Yeah. And so I would say that's definitely a difference between the 1990s, when so much was in person and social support was in person and people got together more, and in our post-COVID world, it's a different time. We're not as connected. There's the whole bowling alone phenomenon, that Robert Putnam identified 20 years ago, that, we tried to solve, but it's actually gotten worse, where we don't have as much connection with other people, and our social institutions are deteriorating as our online world increases, which is unfortunate, because we have this epidemic of loneliness that started even before the pandemic and is driving a lot of our mental health problems. And so part of, another I teach an intro to prevention class, and I teach a group and community intervention class, and a lot of the work I do is kind of these community interventions. And so I talk with the students about, okay, how can we build community? How can we build infrastructure to support connectedness? Because connectedness is what heals us.
Yeah, I was talking to a group of men a few weeks ago. We were having a conversation. It was kind of a gathering. Oh, look at that! I was socializing with the
Good for
other
you.
adult
Good
men.
job,
Good for
Stephen.
me. Yeah. And two
We
of
can't
us.
say that without laughing. That's a
Yeah.
problem, right?
Right. Yeah. Two of the men there, we were talking about reasons why um, we feel that people are less social than they used to. And one thing that I brought up was the disparity between the how much wages have gone up versus how much cost of living and like cost of owning a home and all these things have gone up, and that a lot of people are just so bogged down financially and just like surviving that the idea of like going out and socializing either is like daunting because they're just mentally so bogged down, or financially they're like, well, I'm also doing this side hustle or I have this stuff to do at home and I have these other things. Whereas another group of men present were more on the side of like, oh, people have more free time than ever right now. You think of all the time people spend watching shows or doing this or streaming this or whatever it is, that they're like, there's really no excuse. And I found it interesting. There was a generational gap between these two observations, I think.
Interesting.
But in your, when you look at these families and these parents and their ability to have relationships with their children, do you see the socioeconomic element and the stress of like those things having a correlation to their capacity for like socialization?
That's a really interesting question. And a complicated one to answer. I would say that there's definitely a divide in parentings by socioeconomics, and that there's an expectation for high socioeconomic parents to be taking their kids everywhere, to be providing fancy vacations, and we're comparing each other, to each other online and everybody else's fancy vacation, and to be going to the traveling sports teams because now kids got to get into college because they're going to get paid big bucks if they do get into a team on college. And so there's this pressure to perform that kids, if you talk to kids, adolescents in particular, they're like, this is way too much pressure. Some of that is the U.S. News and World Report pressure to get into the very best, or else I'm not going to be able to, survive in the world is kind of the message adolescents get. And it's really not serving development of teens well. It's serving the U.S. World News and World Report really well, and those who get rated high, but it's not serving adolescents themselves. And I would say the same thing about the sports and the high performance pressure. I've seen some really devastating behaviors of coaches, for example, in the speech and debate world, where they're putting their team's reputation first, or they're putting their...
I was a speech and debate coach for 2 years.
Well, I could tell you some stories. I'm not going to tell those stories publicly, but I can tell you some stories of what other coaches did in retribution when their own players got eliminated to other players. Wow. They care more about their own coaching reputation and their own team reputation than they do sometimes about individuals. And I see that also with, we're flying middle schoolers across the United States to compete in middle school so that they can get into college. And I worry about these trends, right? But then you have, and Annette Lareau wrote a book about this like 20 years ago. Kids who are in lower SES, folks don't have that same investment in their development, and they're often left to free roam quite a bit. And they're watched by relatives or others. And that may sound good, but at the same time, free roaming often means hanging out online without supervision nowadays. And that can lead to problems too, especially if you don't have, when I go speak to parents across the state, and it's about, social media and what we can do to protect kids and promote healthy internet use, I will get 40, 60 parents to show up in the bougie neighborhoods of Portland. But then when I go to an under-resourced school, I might get, 2 or 3 parents or no parents because they don't have the time because they're working 3 jobs. Right. And so I do think that at the extremes, the hyper-parenting and the pressure is not healthy for teens, and the disconnection because low SES parents are so overworked and overwhelmed is not healthy for teens either. And so can we support balance in our society? I know balance is elusive. Nuance doesn't sell online.
No, I'm sorry,
but that's
Jen.
what
I
we
needed
need.
you to give a really
I
an
know.
answer that would invoke rage from either one side or
Right.
the other, preferably both.
Right.
If we can get rage from both sides, even better
Yeah.
engagement.
Yeah. If I can
Um,
piss people off.
yeah, yeah. So work on your
Ugh,
responses. We might have you back
I
again, but I
know.
need you to produce more rage
Scare the
bait
hell
now.
out of the parents.
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Sorry.
Uh-huh. If your child uses a phone for over 3 hours, then they are going to, be
Yeah.
in drugs
Yeah.
in two
Yeah.
months. Something like that.
Yeah.
No. Um, yeah, no, I think it is important. People do like those big flashy answers. My wife, Anna, she's a dietitian, and she does fabulous work at the pediatric clinic here in town. And we both follow this dietitian online, Dr. Jess, who you've probably heard of, or maybe, anyway, she's fabulous. But her whole thing is like taking these videos of people who say these just absurd sort of things like you're describing, these health silver bullets, like, oh yeah, if you don't do this one thing, then you're going to do this and your health is going to change. She's like, no. And she like just provides like the clear
Yeah.
context. It's not, there's nothing magical about it. And that's the sad thing is that most of the conversations that we need to be having in a lot of ways are kind of boring. Like, it's just
Yeah.
like they're very fact based and they're like, this and this and this needs to happen and we just need to fund them.
Yeah.
And there's nothing really edgy or exciting about it. And that's the hard
Yeah.
part, is that those conversations, they don't sell. They're not producing engagement. So it's harder to talk about those things. You have to find some way to talk about something in some niche way that really
Yeah.
seems different and
Or
I don't
edgy or shocking. Yeah.
like, it's very true. I think I was very self-conscious when I started making content online because I was really worried about altering myself for the camera. Like
Yes.
becoming like, guys, oh my gosh, this movie, you're not going to believe it. Like, I don't
Yeah.
talk like that. Like, I would never be like, see somebody in the street and be like, whoa, haven't seen you in so long. How have you been? Like, I would never, but I would see people who talked like that, who had like millions of followers. And I would think, do I need to like talk like that? I don't want that sort of stuff. I don't like engaging with that, but it seems like there's a massive audience of people that do. Do I need to do that? And I didn't, because I couldn't do it authentically. But it is, when you sort of go into the online space, like I question myself a lot, like by talking into the void every day and posting online and then seeing people's
Yeah.
reactions to it. Like, how much is this
Yeah.
reshaping my own perception of myself and my own mental health? And I have to step
Yes.
back and like, and I don't even really talk about it with our 7-year-old. Like, I'm not like, he didn't even
Yeah.
know that I really do it, and that's good. And so,
Yeah.
but I do often wonder, like, okay, I have to like take an inventory of like,
Yeah.
is this impacting me and like how I interact with people? Am I,
Yeah.
do people see
These
me
are
and they're like,
questions. Yeah, these are questions, like I've had these conversations with my no longer teens, my kids who are now in their 20s. And like my son Nate had a video that blew up and had millions of people view it. And it was just him authentically driving across country, being his, his own self.
mm-hmm,
And he's thought about like, oh, should I really dive into this? And ultimately he decided he couldn't be authentic. And like, if authenticity is his brand, he couldn't maintain that authenticity, But, and then my daughter is a comedian in San Diego. She has a day job, but then that's her side gig, speaking of side gigs, if she ever wants to afford to own a house.
right.
And she's wrestled with that idea of like, oh, here I am. How do I, keep my authentic self intact, with a social media presence?
Yeah, well, code switching is real, and like different personas that we use in different scenarios has been a part of existence forever. Like we perform when we're at work and we come home. It's kind of like, all right, I'm hopefully at home I can be, and not for everybody. Some people then also have to perform at home, and that's extra stress. But in the era of social media, and if you are online a lot, if you go from performing at your job to then spending, or at school, to then spending a lot of your time in a digital space, like the performance never stops. Even if you're not posting, even if you're just commenting, the way you're interacting with your community. And I got to imagine, and not do I have to imagine, I have felt it myself. Like
Yeah.
I need some space. I need to like
Yeah.
just exist.
Well, and then think about development here. If we come back to the idea of adolescence and what adolescents' main task in during their teen years is identity development. And so if you have that hyper blown up online, and then you have people calling you out for not being the person you were in this and such post, and you have a Finsta, which is not your real identity, or maybe that is your real identity, and then you have your more groomed identity for the public.
Ugh.
Like, what that becomes exhausting, and it's a
Oh, yeah.
whole other layer of identity development that the kids, the teens in this movie didn't have to deal with, that kids today do. And they are, authenticity is really important to teens, and they call each other out for exploring publicly online. And that becomes really hard to hold.
There's a line at the end when he's with the doctor after he opens up. He says, "There is so much pain, and I don't know how to not notice it," which is a beautiful line and something that I have felt in my own life. And I think that a lot of young people and a lot of adults too, there's an endless amount of pain that we can engage with on a daily level of real things and things that we should be bothered by, things that are bad and things that we do need to change in our society, in ways that current legislation are impacting certain groups of people. There is pain, and the pain is real, but Charlie is so paralyzed by all this pain that he constantly observes. And I wanted to ask you, kind of as somebody who's done research on adolescent development, for young people and even adults who see the world this way and who are bogged down by this, like, what are some steps that they can take to, while still not just ignoring it all, because that's not the answer either. Like, well, I'm just going to act like nothing's wrong in the world. Like you said, it's not either one or the other. But I don't know, what do you see, and how do we approach that?
Yeah. So one thing I will say is that emotional regulation is one of the strongest predictors for good outcomes for young people. And so one of the things we teach parents when we do parent interventions is how to regulate themselves, which then they model to their kids, and then their kids do better. But I have a colleague, Wendy Hadley, who teaches emotional regulation and has some interventions around this. And they use the phrases, get out, let it out, think it out. And these are emotional regulation techniques. So when we feel the overwhelming emotions of living in a world where there's so much pain, get out is sometimes we need to leave the room, right? Sometimes we need to just walk away, calm down. And sometimes we can't leave the room, so we can get out in our head and we can go to a beach that we loved and imagine that, right? And then let it out would be like a physical release of our emotions. And so if you could clench your hands, you could clench your shoulders for 10 seconds and then release. You could go for a run. You could physically find some way to take that emotion and translate it into physical energy and release it out into the world. Go for a hike in nature, And then the last one is think it out. And that's more of a cognitive behavioral strategy where we are teaching teens to recognize their reaction, their thought reaction, and challenge it and say, I'm going to think about this differently. I'm going to choose to think about this differently. And a good example of that is hostile attribution. So let's say you have some kids online and they see somebody makes a comment, and the teen's initial response is to take it personally. And so they could recognize that and feel themselves getting activated and say, maybe they just had a bad day, or maybe they didn't mean that as directed to me. Like, they must have had a really crappy day to react like that. And let it go. Like, choose to not interpret it in a personal way. And so watching our own stories that we tell ourselves and choosing a different narrative is kind of what that last strategy is about.
But if everybody starts to think the best about other people, the internet would atrophy. There'd be
Yes.
nothing
And
left.
so that is not how the algorithms like currently work. And honestly, I do think we need to hold big tech accountable and that we need to change the algorithms that are being fed to teens. And there's some bills being considered. The COSA bill is one of them in Congress right now. And it's not a perfect bill, but they're still reconciling it. And if there's something you don't like about it, you could actually talk to them and say, hey, please change this about it. But holding big tech accountable to not feed up the very worst of our society to our young people and on endless scroll is probably something we want to consider as a society.
Right. And I think it's helpful when we recontextualize these things in 20 years ago. If there was a shop that showed up in your community 20 years ago and it was a movie theater, and they said, we cater to adolescents, and then they showed the stuff to adolescents in that theater that they were being fed on social media right now, you would have parents in that community saying, get that business out of here. Or even adolescents that might say, I don't necessarily want this. I want something else. And so a lot of times, and I think about AI in a similar way, like AI is this thing there have been AI chatbots that have encouraged children to take their own lives, that have, like, while chatting, they've given them the steps and they've said, like, I'm here for you when it happens. After it's over, I'll be there. And then I got asked at my last job to use AI to do all this stuff. And I think if you sent me a machine to my house and said, we want you to use this machine, just a heads up, it's like killed a few people, but we want you to use it, I would say never in a million years. So because something exists sometimes on a screen, we give it a lot of leeway in terms of its impacts because it seems so, like, abstract. Whereas if it's a physical machine or a physical place in front of you that's doing this thing, we wouldn't be okay with it. And I think that this idea of how intangible a lot of the social media and digital stuff is, it feels like impossible to fight against because it is this big abstract thing. But there are people behind that big abstract thing that are pulling the levers that are designing it. And you're right, we do need to regulate it.
Yeah, there's teams of people who are designing it to keep us on as long as possible because the business models that we're allowing right now are attention driven. And so all of us are having a hard time with attention. Another good book.
That's why I make my podcast. I try not to keep people's attention by just not planning anything and having a conversation with nuance. I don't have those people working for me. I
love it. Interesting. I mean, these are interesting questions that we do have to grapple with as a society. And, the role of AI is it inherently destructive, or does it depend on what we are going to feed it? Those are things we're going to have to keep grappling with. And and what are these algorithms doing to our politics and our ways of being with each other, and what do we want? I would love the ability to choose the algorithm that I want for my own health and mental health,
Yeah.
And I would like that for kids too, for teens in particular.
Yeah, no, I think that would, being able to elect and being able to really define it. But this was awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, Jen. It was so nice. We've had lots of, like, brief conversations, and I've even been to your home before. And Anna and I had dinner with you guys, which was a lot of fun. But as, like, an adult with kids, I don't get a lot of time to just sit and chat with another adult besides Anna, which we have lots of great conversations, but it's just nice to be able to chat with another person. And this was a lot of fun. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for all of your insights.
Thank you for having me.
Perks of Being a Wallflower was written and directed by Stephen Shabowski. Cast Logan Lerman, Emma Watson, Ezra Miller, and Paul Rudd. Cinematographer Andrew Dunn, editor Mary Jo Markey, score Michael Brook, producers John Malkovich, Leanne Halfin, and Russell Smith. Remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation. Check out Film Club for the End of the World on Patreon for more. See you next week.